up, man? It's Ward Wrestling here. Just got back from Fargo, Lima, Peru. What a trip. But we're here about Fargo, and we're with the head man in charge, David Mason. What an awesome trip. And I know, as you mentioned, we were talking off of here, you're down at state champ camp. And oddly enough, about 6 or 7 of your Team Florida coaches have made the trip too, unknowing to you.
Yeah, we didn't actually I didn't even find out about it when we were hanging out in Fargo. I just walked in the door and there they are. So it's, it's a testament to these coaches. They put the work in. It's not a random selection. A lot of the coaches that you see on a regular basis that are putting the time in, they persons want to spend a week away from your family and run around, Fargo and coach other people's kids and all that stuff under the banner of Team Florida. But that's the job. And I felt like this year we had an unbelievable staff that it was very refreshing to have, a lot of the young guys with a lot of energy and, no expectation. They showed up ready to work, and they were all about Team Florida. And that's really what we've been trying to build over the last, 4 or 5 years with the national teams program and the stipends and all that. That's the big picture of it. But yeah, our staff was phenomenal this year. Actually, I felt really, really good about it. We put a lot of time and effort into the selection process with the board and making sure that we put the right people around the kids. It's important. It's important in a lot of different ways. From the banner of being in charge, obviously, first and foremost is safety and making sure that the kid are taken care of. So when you have really good, diligent coaches that do the right thing, then it takes a lot of stress off of my back and it makes it a lot easier for me to function in my role. And then on top of that, when I, get a chance, I switch hats and I coach. So when these guys are on their game and they're doing like what we talked about, it allows me to actually be able to coach my kids at Fargo, which I think people would assume happens anyway, but it doesn't always happen for me. So kudos to the coaches for sure.
You'll definitely see like a BB Train jumping in, a JT jumping in, a Roger jumping in, a Duck, and we could go through all of them. But man, obviously this is a stressful thing. It's a lot of work for you, but you've been sticking with it. And what does it mean to you to be? This is a state that you grew up in. So to coach Team Florida now, to be the guy, what's that mean to you?
I take a lot of pride in being a Floridian, number one. I was wrestling in the same tournament back in the day. I never thought it would come full circle and, I would be on the coaching staff or even, leading the cause at this point for the trips. But I do remember vividly when I was a kid, going to Fargo or Tulsa or whatever it may be, you always get the comments like, Florida, they have wrestling, so I always took that personally. And over the course of, the last couple of decades, we've made huge strides in the state in our sport and in folk style and all styles, especially folk style. And because of those things, the narrative has changed. And I think from a national standpoint and like Fargo and the national duels, we've really made strides in the quality of participation as well as just sheer numbers. So we're trending obviously in a very good direction, as is USA Wrestling as a whole. I think I've said it a few times and people understand, like, Fargo's the largest wrestling tournament in the world. And it has doubled in size since the year before COVID. So this year we reached 8,000 for the first time ever.
Yeah, it's been amazing to be there and see the growth. Obviously, he's in the back seat of his Jeep, guys. So if you hear a little delay in him, that's the reason. But yeah, as you were talking about the numbers there and the growth, and he had mentioned over 8,000 kids this time, that kind of led me into one of my questions I wrote down was the Florida numbers growing just over the last 3 years that I've been there with you. I can look at the team photo and see how much it is. You had almost maybe a little over 200 kids this year. Is that the are we? And I don't think we've hit the level that we can hit. Obviously, girls wrestling is growing, but how happy are you with the growth in numbers? And are there goals? Is the goal to grow the numbers and still keep going?
Yeah. So I mean, man without a goal is going nowhere, right? So we definitely have goals from the standpoint of the state and state association, as well as individually, like the national teams portion of it. We certainly have goals. When I started, the goal was growth, right? The goal was growth to be transparent in what we were doing, and to make sure that the people that weren't a part of it felt welcome, and that we could dispel any untruths from the past, right? And the past is something that I don't have a part of, and I've heard some stories about, obviously over the years. And the first couple years, we were undoing a lot of negative talk based upon previous leadership, what they did to the association, and in turn what they did to the wrestling community. So the first year when we took over, yeah, the goal was sheer growth, like to get the product to be available for people to understand the qualifying process, how it all works, that type of thing. In the short period of time, I think we've come, full circle compared to where we were starting. Just the basics, understanding wise of what's going on. When I started, people didn't even know how to qualify. They didn't know which tournaments were which, how to do it, that type of thing. So Steve Hall, you remember Steve?
Yeah.
Steve Hall started the stipends program with some help from Dale, and those guys put a lot of time and effort into trying to come up with something that would stimulate some growth. So I give a lot of credit to them for the idea and for getting it kickstarted. I took over after the first year that they implemented that system, and I feel like at this point we've grown tremendously because of that, and because of the knowledge base that's going across the state. And I think it's spreading. The coaches who weren't a part of it, for whatever reason, they've started reaching out and participating and doing different things that show that they understand the benefits of wrestling international style and getting different competitions in the summertime. So
Yeah,
growth has been tremendous. Sorry. And
no problem.
that's obviously the goal, but at this point, we are looking to continue growing, but growing in a way that produces the quality athletes that we want, right? So not just winning, but seeing the kids that are going and spending the time and effort to go on these trips, knowing that they're prepared, and or setting up, something that allows them the opportunity to do that. It's always going to be a choice at the end, but I feel like, when I started, there wasn't a choice. There wasn't many choices. So the community as a whole, I think, is really starting to buy in on the benefits of it. And, from there we grow. I don't think it's rocket science. If you treat people a certain way and you give them a certain
And I
product,
tell
and
people too, when I come home,
you're a man of your word.
yeah, you broke up a little bit there. You said a man of your word.
So Yeah, I know I'm talking about just in general. I think our our mission, and at the start our mission was a little bit different. It's more or less, how are we treating people? Like, do they feel welcome? If we're going to unspell or dispel some of these untruths, then we really have to understand that first and foremost, like, the wrestling community is our customer. That's what we're servicing, right? So we're trying um to get the good word out there, but at the same time they have to believe in the people that are behind it, and believe that when we say something, we're going to do it, that the transparency's there, um and that not just in areas where the wrestling is abundant.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And I've gotten to experience that over the last few years. So obviously, I appreciate your support for me and getting to get out there and experience it. The first year was with my son, and then the last 2 years without him. But yeah, I see the work that you guys put in and what you guys do, and it's just, I mean, if sometimes I talk to parents, and I say, if you have something to complain about, which is okay, that's your right to complain about it, but you should go experience Fargo. You should go there with this group, with your son, and be there for the 10 days, 11 days. And you should experience it and witness what these coaches do for your children and what your children go through. Um, and then if you still have something to complain about, please do. But you should definitely do that, because what these coaches do and go through those 11 days, what your kids go through grueling 10, 11 days of work. And remember, these kids are weight cutting, they're wrestling. If they go 0-2, they've got to sit around for a couple of days till Greco goes, and then they got to cut weight again, and then they got to make Greco weight, and then they got to. So your kids are uncomfortable too, and we just have to understand that. But that kind of leads me into my next question. It's a far trip, right, from Florida to Fargo. It costs money, but I know you're a big advocate that kids should experience this. Why do you feel parents should budget for this trip and make sure that their kids, why it's important that their kids experience this trip?
In my mind, there's a lot of positives to it. The trip in itself has a lot of moving parts, right? So it's not something that we put together in the last month or anything like that. Um, this year we capped the boys out at 110, and we had a demand for more, right? So the girls, and this goes on the growth more than anything, but this year the girls, we capped it at 55. Most of these, or 50% of what's going on, is a stipend or a reduction in price of the full trip, based upon how you place in the qualifiers. So I think that there's a number of reasons why it's a great trip, but from memories and experience wise, I've never been on a trip or been a part of a trip that's even remotely close. So it works like like you're on an exchange trip to a different country almost. We're there for so long that you get ingrained with the coaches. You start with training camps and things where you're around the best of the best who are trying to unify Team Florida and come together to prepare themselves for a tough challenge, right? So I think starting from the training camp, we spend thousands of dollars as high school coaches and parents chasing down good competition, right? And that good competition is dependent on how you do at the tournament, how they do at the tournament. Sometimes you can spend all that money and still not get to wrestle the best guys, or wrestle them all at the same tournament. So anytime you have an opportunity like the training camp to get together with the best kids in the state, the best kids around your weight, age group up, age group down, and get to compete for a few days, I think that in itself is awesome for the kids. You usually see a lot of growth in the kids in those situations. That being said, like when you go to the state tournament, right, in March for folk style, I'm walking around and every kid that you see, I saw at the camp, right? So I didn't know a lot of them before they qualified or before they went on these trips, but you end up branching out and networking. I end up meeting a whole bunch of new kids. The kids do the same things. They end up making friends in different areas, doing stuff with coaches that they normally wouldn't, finding attachments in different ways that end up, helping benefit them as a wrestler and as a person. So a lot of these, not a lot of them, all of them, in some way, shape, or form, the coaches are mentors, right? Part of that selection process is that these kids are going to be around them for 9 or 10 days. And it's not just sitting in the corner. Like there's a lot of time in between where in between your matches or in between the sessions where you're going to have the opportunity to speak with, these coaches, the wrestlers, and get as much wrestling information as you possibly could. It's obviously a perk and a benefit if you're wrestling and competing in July, because that means if you're taking it serious in June, July, May, whatever, you're continuing to train longer. You're continuing to try to find better partners to train with. A lot of times in the summer, this is where you end up traveling a little bit more to find those types of things. So a lot of times this is where you're
Yeah,
working circle grows as well. So,
yeah,
I mean,
I
programs
agree with
and
you.
go like the competition itself speaks for itself.
Yeah, and obviously, and on top of that, the college coaches you get to meet. How many times, at least over the last 3 years that I've been with you, you've seen kids that were committed to a junior college, and they got a scholarship to an NAIA or D3 or D2 or D1, or they were committed to a D2, and now they're at D1, all because they got seen. A lot of kids, this is the one trip that their family saves up for, looks forward to, so they don't get to travel as much as maybe some other kids that maybe have the funds or more ability to do so. But now they get seen and they get more opportunity, which is awesome. And I know we have kids out there. We obviously see most of the kids, every kid that goes typically wrestles the freestyle, but then we see the numbers drop when we transition to Greco days. Um, is that okay? Would you like to see more kids stick around and do the Greco? How important is it to you to see them do both while they're out there?
Yeah, so if you've never been to Fargo, or just understanding wise, like what you're saying, the amount of college coaches, world champions, Olympic champions, world medalists that are walking around that building is the highest percentage of any place that you could possibly be. The access that you have to them is always something that marvels me in general. As a coach, I personally like to go and stand behind the people that I know are of value in coaching in the style and listen to how they coach. So I, as a wrestler, would do the same thing, but you also have the opportunity and the ability to walk directly up to these people and ask them any question, speak to them, introduce yourself, talk about wrestling, games.
Yeah, we lost you for
Wouldn't even be there
we
when I
lost
tried
you
to
for
ask him a
a
question.
right, and we lost him for a second there. As you guys heard, all he said was, these coaches are very accessible. You walk up, and the college coaches are leaning up against the wall. I mean, you can walk up and say, it could be anybody, and you can just walk up and introduce yourself. And I'm a kid that wrestles. I love your school. Please watch me. Whatever you want to say or questions. How can I get seen by a college? And they'll do that. And that's what he was saying when he built up the Sorry Nation.
Yeah, just for Florida, just take ours, and every state kind of does it in a similar manner. We have college coaches on our staff. For Florida, in a given year we have 2 or 3 active college wrestlers. that are still competing in Division I, that are coming back to help and to lend a hand. And what I've found over the years is that networking that happens there, it always turns into somebody on our team getting another opportunity, right? So John coaches for X school or whatever, you know, whoever this 126-pounder from Florida unrecruited or stuff happens every single trip. Kids are upgrading their colleges. They're going from not wrestling in college or not even having an offer or thinking about it to leaving there with options, you know,
I mean, I
a
remember talking to you
re-sparked
about,
option towards the next level.
yeah, I remember coming up to you when Roderick Brown All-American, and I was like, we were talking a little bit, and I was like, yeah, but he's kind of already committed to a junior college, and you said, well, I don't know, coaches have been asking me about him. So perfect example.
Yeah.
He made on freestyle 2 years in a row. He makes the blood round, and on folk style, the All-American this year. And there's a perfect example. You see, I'm talking to Mason. He's like, you never know. Coaches are asking about him. So that's awesome. Perfect example there.
It's true. So half the time it's something that happens so naturally too. In Rod's case, for instance, he's wrestling one of those matches late into it, and somebody comes up from behind and just starts talking to me, right? And before I can turn around and figure out who it is, he's asking me for contact information, right? And the guy that's doing it's an NCAA champ who coaches at a very good school, and he had no clue who he was beforehand. And within 30 seconds to a minute, he's got everything he needs. He's watching it himself, right? So he comes from that to me shooting him his contact right there with our phones, and then that's what gives it legs.
And what's crazy, and I know
it happens all the time. It happens all the time.
I have another question for you before I send you back, but that led me into it's crazy. That's just, I forget where I was going, but it is crazy because these.
Well, I didn't answer your last question either. So
about competing in both styles,
right? So Roger, yeah. So a couple of the things that I think that are advantage or that I like. So think about Roderick, think about Gunnar Holland, Anderson Heap, right? These are guys that are going to Fargo with unfinished business, right? They're going back after their senior year, after they've graduated, and all of them All-Americans, right? So I've watched those guys wrestle for a long time, right? I've known them since they were kids. The first experience I had coaching Anderson was I think at Fargo, and he split his head open, right? And I was trying to help him with the trainer. I didn't really like what the trainer was saying or what they were going to do. And Anderson obviously wanted to continue wrestling, so we weren't going to accept what they were saying. So, with his parents' permission, we sealed him up. We got him glued up. We got it all done correctly, wrapped up, and he wrestled the remaining part of the tournament, a couple matches, with a head wrap and me at his side, right? That's something that we talk about. That's not unique to me. That's unique to the tournament, to the situation, and to the bonds that end up happening very naturally. From that point,
he spoke about it when I talked to those guys. Because I asked him about, I just mentioned you, and I said, hey, what is Coach Mason? And that's the story he told. He said, man, this is really good for me. And that just meant a lot.
Yeah, awesome. So I obviously remember the same thing. And our relationship built from there. I love his family. They're awesome people. Anderson's obviously a cool dude, and I was pulling for him tremendously. I've watched him come so close so many times to watch him, watch a good kid who works hard, does the right thing, to watch them have success at the end, to put it on the line. He's already got his wrestling scholarship. He doesn't have to do any of this stuff, like props to him and Gunner for, putting it out there and going and finishing the job. And I was really proud of all three of those guys, but the two Osceola guys in particular have had a lot of bullshit and adversity happen to them, behind the scenes in different ways that most people don't know. So I'm a fan. Obviously to watch that happen for me, it makes the hundreds and hundreds of hours that it takes to make this stuff go down right. Those are the types of moments and things that make it all worth it, that make me
couldn't
feel good.
happen to couldn't happen to better kids. And something I wanted to ask you, and I know my last question I wrote down is looking forward to. We saw Coach Greco in at the duels, and it was fucking awesome. And how close are we to seeing that at Fargo? And are you looking forward to it?
It's a done deal. It's a done deal. Yeah, that's part of the meetings that we have to attend, and part of the overall mission for USA Wrestling is their board, just like ours, meets and has a process to it where they have goals and different things. And this one has been in the making for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. It started with the duels. They didn't really know what it was going to be like, but I think they realized really quickly, like, it doesn't matter what it is wrestling wise for girls. This is just growing very, very fast. So that 8,200 person tournament is about to be 10,000 probably next year. So it's already approved. It's just a question of, is it going to be in action next year? There was talks of it being this year. Obviously that didn't happen, but I'm gonna say with 75% certainty we're gonna have Greco at Fargo next year for girls. If not, the following year, definitely. But if I was a betting man, I'd bet on next summer.
Yeah, and then some people would say, we only had one Florida kid in the finals this year. Typically, we have more. When the question comes to me, was it a down year, this and that? I say, okay, maybe. However, we had in both styles over 25, close to 30 kids that were in the blood rounds. And all these kids were probably from 8th grade to 10th grade. 90% of these kids were. So, yeah, if you're going to look at it like it was a down year because we didn't have finalists or a champ, that's fine. But go back and look at that. We had 25, 30 kids that were one match away from All-American, if that's a word. And they are all young, very, very young. So we are going to see an explosion, I feel like, in Florida as far as All-Americans. What's your opinion?
So, man, I think it's a good problem to have when statistically they're saying it's a down year when we're having double-digit All-Americans, and we're having, I don't remember what the tally was, but between the girls and the boys, over 20 All-Americans or somewhere around there. Yeah, this year we didn't have a champ. Last year we were spoiled. We had 4 or 5 of them, but I think it's important to understand how the process works too, because this plays into the whole thing. This year we left a lot of talent at home, for sure. We left a lot of talent at home.
I was with Claire Bowie in Lima.
Controlled.
Yeah, I saw Claire Bowie win a gold medal in Lima.
Michael Mako is training for Worlds, so he didn't compete. Sawyer's the returning champ. He had surgery. I mean, just in my club at home, I have 2 All-Americans that are hurt, not wrestling themselves. I have 2 kids that lost in the blood round from last year that obviously wanted to avenge that. But all of, that's just talking about my team. And when you look across the state, we have a lot of talent. We have a lot of talent, and we have a lot of kids that can compete at this level and really turn heads. But again, it's a question of getting everybody going in the same direction, and also understanding how the system works for separation was what they used to call it. It's called seeds. And if you acquire, like if you place at any of the nationals or you have success at the regional tournament, right? Or you have success the to basically like building your track profile. It's not track profile, it's a pin system. And if you have more points, then you go towards a seed. And the people that don't have points, obviously don't. But what it does for you is these brackets are 256 kids, right?
It's huge.
And
Unbelievable.
if you're one of the seeded ones, then as a general, you should not be wrestling another one of those hammer type kids in the first or second round. You can get a little momentum under your, now it doesn't always work out that way, but when you do go to the regionals, and Southeast regionals has the same value as any other regional, Western, Northern Plains, whatever. So they give you points based upon how you place, right? And the freestyle tournament and the Greco tournament are considered two separate things, right? Placing in one doesn't have for the other one. But once you start to build pinpoints, they carry over, and it starts to put you in a position where when you're wrestling 7, 8, 9 matches, out there and getting a tech fall and getting off the match can be an invaluable thing for 2 rounds later, for the quarterfinals, for the semis, or whatever. When you're wrestling the best kids in the country, you're trying to stop gut wrenches and stuff like that. The least amount of time that you have to do that, the better. So, being a master of the tactics in freestyle, it does such a huge thing for a folk style mind to have to start to think about and to plan around the out of bounds, to plan and to wrestle through the passivities, through the parterre positions. I just think that it really really forces you to think about things in a different way, to be clean with your wrestling. Like, you have to finish your shots clean. It doesn't matter how good or deep you're in. If you don't know how to finish correctly, then the points are not going to be balanced out in the same way that folk style is.
And the experience of these younger kids getting to go there. I mean, listen, we had, I think between 8th and 10th grade, 90% of those kids in the blood round were there. And even 11th grade, there was some. And I mean, listen, we were one win away from putting 25 kids on the podium. And that means a lot. I think keep your eyes on Florida and us, and I think we're going to have great. I mean, one of
The
our
girls
girls
did
at All-American was an 8th grader, right, going to the 9th grade.
Yeah, the girls had a very similar thing to what you're describing. They crushed the first session. They were really wrestling well. We had a break, and obviously the wrestling gets better as you come back. But this goes into kind of me thinking big picture as a coach, as a team leader. When you're talking about 30 people in the blood round or the pre-blood round, and then the amount of All-Americans that you have after that, yeah, is it good to have that many people in the blood round? Absolutely. But it also says that you're very, very close, and that doing little things here or there a little bit different probably changes your outcome, right? Going to Southeast regionals and placing, going to the camps and learning how to tactically wrestle through that step out, where instead of just giving up the 1 point, you gave up the 1 point and a caution in 1 point, and that caution ends up beating you at the end. Just situations like this where the brain is forced to adapt. It's forced to grow and adapt at a high rate in a fast pace. And to me, it's just fun. Freestyle is so much fun. And as a coach and an athlete, once March hits, we all need a break, to a certain extent. But when we get into freestyle, it just completely changes how I have to think about coaching. So it makes me uncomfortable. When it makes me uncomfortable, I work harder. You either quit or you work harder, right? So I've had a lot of
And he's talking about his growth as a coach.
myself, and I've
We lost him
What's
a
that?
little bit there. We lost you a little bit there, but if you didn't hear him, he's talking about obviously his growth as a coach too, and when he's seeing kids come up, and he's frozen a little bit there, but
The freestyle perspective.
yeah, you're there, you're back. But yeah, and listen, and there's a lot of kids in our state that qualify for 16 under next year, but they didn't qualify this year. That are really, really, really good. So I'm excited to see boys and girls. I'm excited to see the next few years what our state does, because yeah, we have a huge class graduating this year, but there's some young kids coming up, and I feel like next year we're going to start to see that come to fruition. But
Yeah, you've seen it too. Like, hopefully these guys understand too, to have success at Fargo and stuff like that. It's an experience. And like for most of the kids, when they go and experience it, it's even bigger than what they imagined or what they were planning on. Even though it's not that big, it's a wrestling tournament, as we always say, right? But if you start putting yourself in the process as an eighth grader, as opposed to the first time that you go is when you're an 11th grader, like going to Fargo as a first year junior and that being your first experience with Fargo, that's like that's a kick in the junk. Like the juniors is that's men. That's dudes that are beating the snot out of each other. Whether I'm gonna tech you or not, when I go out there, you are going to punch me in the face. You are going to, no matter if you think you're gonna win or not. There's no clean matches. You're not getting through it without a little bit of a fight. Whereas I think in the cadets, you still have some kids, and when those kids start losing, they don't necessarily start punching and cheating. And hey, those juniors have put a lot of time and effort into it. It is so competitive. Like when there's 256 people in a bracket and you look through it, or whether there's 75 state champions or something like that, like, and those,
well,
like
and,
the
and this
numbers are,
year we saw world kids that won the trials to get to the Olympic trials were there.
it happens all the time, and they lose at Fargo. That's how competitive it is. And
It's
you have
unbelievable.
to be on your game. You have to be on your game to win Fargo, no doubt about it. But you also learn that it's a long tournament. Fargo's a long tournament. It's a tough tournament, and there's lots of sways, right? And you could be wrestling lights out on one day, and if you're not on your game, like the next day can be completely different. So I love it. Obviously, one of the things that was brought up earlier, I want to make sure that I put this out there. I want the criticism, right? I would much
One second.
rather have.
Say that again because you froze.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Yeah. So I was just saying, like, um, we love feedback. I love feedback. So I'm not looking at complaints or feedback as just negative. I want the complaints, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, right? This is something that we always utilize and speak upon to find the truths, untruths, and to utilize for growth. So I feel very comfortable with anybody communicating, text, email, phone, whatever it is. If you like something about it, right? It may seem very obvious that that's something good going on in the trip, but maybe we're overlooking it. Shooting hey, this was really good idea. This was awesome. That's great. If you found something that was the opposite of that, maybe we didn't notice it. Maybe it was something that wasn't as visible as you think, or maybe it's something that wasn't fixed at the time. That's stuff that I definitely want to know about. And I think as a whole, the people that we have on the board now, the people that are involved now, this is how we think. This is how we communicate, and this is what the mission is: to improve the product, to be transparent about the product, and at the same time to have an open invitation for the people to want to come and participate, but to also increase the quality of what we're doing, not just on the wrestling mat, but off the wrestling mat. And I think our trips in general, I mean, there's always going to be stuff that goes on. And if we had another 30 minutes, I could tell you the madness and craziness that happened just this trip, but it doesn't matter. You know, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. We have
Yeah.
to be able to work through it. And our coaches did.
And
Shout
it's
out to
great.
them.
And you hear a guy like JT talk about how he wants to travel the country to go see how other coaches are doing it, to be able to bring that back to Team Florida and kind of and say, look, this is what I've seen around the country. How can we implement some of this? This is what they're doing in California or South Carolina, wherever, Illinois. And it's really cool when you get to talk to coaches like that on the trip and you see, which is probably why he won the award, obviously, right? But yeah, I mean,
well, there's a reason. There's a reason why he was awarded the National Developmental Person of the Year for the whole country. There's a reason why. He's an outstanding individual. He's a great human being on top of it. But the stuff that you just said is part of what I'm referencing. Like the people that have been recruited to the board and are now working to make all of this stuff better, like the last, 4 years or so, it's been a complete change. And the change from the inside has come from individuals like JT, right? People that are about the state of Florida, they're about the kids, and they're not scared to work. You know, that guy is a workhorse. He'll help you with anything. He's done an amazing job at basically do a full override and overhaul on all of our accounts, finances. He acts as the treasurer. 100% of it is visible and transparent. Every step of the process is A plus. Like, and that's not something that we had when the old regime got out, and it's not something that we had the whole time. This is part of the growth that I'm talking about that we've had over the last couple years, and part of the growth that's the most important. It's not how many wrestlers did you get to the tournament. That's not the important part, because next year we could have nobody at the tournament. It's about the leadership at the top, and what these adults are willing to do, because everybody that's working for FAWA or USA Wrestling or whatnot, these are volunteers. Like a good 99% of the stuff that we do is volunteer work. So when you're thinking about that as a whole, and you got to keep in mind, like, these guys are giving up their family time, they work regular jobs, they're doing all of this extra without pay to help the state of Florida and to promote wrestling and to try to better the product. So I know this because I have to work with all of them and go through the whole process, right? And I am extremely grateful, right? I'm extremely grateful,
we could
because
spend
if we don't,
hour. We could spend an hour talking individually about each coach, right? And the
well,
things that they do for you.
if we don't have these individuals, Dan, then we have another one, right? It's not like you can't send nobody, right? So if we don't have these guys, somebody else is going. That's all I know, right? And over the course of the last few years, I've made it my mission to not have anybody on the trip that is not about Team Florida and is not about the things that we express as our mission statement, right? And if we can't, if we can't do that, and maybe you did fool somebody and get on the trip, that's usually when you don't come back. So it's a very easy deal in the process. If you're a good, hard, honest working person, we love you. That's about it.
It's great. I mean, I was driving. First of all, I took the keys from Roger Allcraft so that we could make it to the airport in a timely fashion this year. So
you gave him the lead foot.
Yeah, I gave him the left foot. But before we wrap up, the one thing that I remember him saying to me is, "Man, I love this. I would clean toilets if that's what Team Florida needed. This is just something that I love to do," and that's I think the sentiment of all these coaches.
Yeah, not everybody's like that. It takes a lot of most people approach it like that, and they tell you they're like that. And then when you're in the 14th hour of the day at Fargo, it really shows what you're about. And then if you make it through that day, guess what? We're going to be up at 6 o'clock tomorrow for another 14 hours, right? So it goes well past being excited or all that. Like, you're really going to show your true colors because it's a long trip. It's a tough thing on the kids and the coaches. And if you're not about it, you're going to get left behind. So this year we had a lot of young up and coming type coaches and kids that were new additions to the program, and every year we turn over 50% of the coaches, right? So it shouldn't ever feel like, oh, it's locked in place. I don't have a chance to be a coach. They've already picked the coaches. I can tell you with 100% certainty that is not the case. Not the case at all. So yeah, we do have people that are going every year, and that's because they have a job title and they serve a function on the board and different things. Like, it wouldn't make much sense to not take the cadet team leader to the cadet nationals, right? So half of the coaching staff every summer gets turned over, and we try to branch out and give opportunities where they're due. We're not just going to give them out because to give them out, but I think we've really done a good job of spreading them out through the different areas of the state, not having all the coaches come from this, the same 3 cities or whatever. We've really got great representation amongst the counties of the state. And I think because of that, we're starting to get representation with the wrestlers, with the coaches, with the different programs. And the momentum has really been noticeable from when I started to right now.
These coaches are stoked. I mean, I talked to them, for example, Ryan Blackwell, Chris Kelly, and I can keep going through them. They were all, as soon as they got selected, man, I talked to them and they were just overjoyed with the opportunity to get out there and help Team Florida, which is awesome. But man, Mace, I know you got paid champ camp right outside your Jeep there. You got kids in there. Your son is in there working, I'm sure. I appreciate you taking the time to jump on with me and do this, man. It's always a pleasure. Obviously, I appreciate all your support for me and what I've been doing, and thanks for all that you do.
Absolutely. You're an invaluable asset to the program. Nobody knows what you do. Like, we all see that you do a ton of stuff, but I can tell you that that's not even 50% of what you do. So we all know that you do a lot, but nobody really knows. And until you're around and see the amount of effort that goes into doing your job, I commend you, man. You're an awesome dude. And I do appreciate all you do for Vala and for the kids.
I appreciate it.
Somebody's knocking on my window right now.